All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the What You Don't Hear podcast, and this is a 15-minute Friday. Whether it's a Friday when you're actually listening to it or not, the whole point of this is to be a quick little subject piece, maybe to send you into, well, if it's a Friday, send you into your weekend with some nice, positive, motivational, or actionable advice from me and a returning guest from a past podcast. But we're saving the stories for another time for this one because this one is all about quick, hot topics. And returning for this one, you've seen his face, you've heard his voice a lot on these. A man that is nearly my co-host for these 15-minute Fridays at this point, as you hear him giggle from the darkness of the audio world. Unless you're watching this, then you're watching him giggle.
Yeah.
What? You just spoiled. You're not supposed to say anything until I.
Do people actually recognize my voice?
Well, no, when you're changing it like that. Josh Emerick back on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Josh, welcome to the What You Don't Hear podcast for the 7,000th time.
That's about right.
Thanks for being back to talk about some more subjects with me on another 15-minute Friday. The thing is, we talk to each other nearly every single day, and these are all subjects that we talk about all the time. But more importantly, it's conversations that we've noticed that it's a lot of topics and conversation that we've had with a lot of other people, right? So we figured, hey, this would be a good 15-minute Friday. So the topic of this 15-minute Friday is one that, I don't know, I'm actually interested to hear a lot of your takes on, because I feel like this topic comes from a place a lot of the times more from almost a complaining place in a way. Maybe things that you and I complain about that we see other people do and we're like, why can't they just do it this way? I don't understand. Why can't things be better, at least in our opinion? So I'm actually interested, because I have my straightforward way of explaining things a lot, but I'm interested to hear the Josh Emerick way. So the topic of this episode is weighing out, finding that balance of substance or style. So I'm going to break that down real quick before we hit the timer and before we jump in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of industries, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of creatives in general. This can tap into that hype mentality, I think, a little bit, but there's a lot of things that focus way more on the flashy outward style that something is given, rather than finding out or creating what is the actual purpose and what is the substance behind that thing existing. We're probably going to talk a lot about, I don't know, what's that saying? Don't judge a book by its cover, that sort of thing. We're going to break that down. So I'm going to start the clock. I'm going to toss it across the table to you. Well, not my phone.
No, okay.
I'm not going to toss it.
I'm not going to start my... I will probably miss it, and it'll be super embarrassing.
We'll clarify that real quick. I'm not going to start the timer on my phone and then toss my phone, but the subject, the topic, right?
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to toss to you.
Cool.
So timer has started. Our 15 to 30, 40, 45 minutes begins right now. Josh, take it away. Substance over style.
So this one is tricky. I'm not sure where we're going to go, but I will say this does come from a place of complaining. And so often I get really frustrated when I see, whether that be dollars, whether that be hype, whether that be an idea thrown at something versus functionality versus, is this actually going to work? We could take this a lot of different ways, but to me, the functionality piece is really the biggest thing. And I'm probably the worst artist in the world. You look at my office is super, super, super plain. Like, I have minimal distractions. I'm not very artistic. I'm more so like, this needs to work. I need to get a certain task done here. And that's all I really care about. And
Hold on. You didn't paint that painting behind you? For the people watching this on YouTube, there's a really nice painting behind it. So you're telling me you didn't make that and put that in the studio?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I'll clarify. I'm speaking about my personal office. So, style's important. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. We make flashy things. We make really beautiful things. We're so freaking good at what we do.
That's what this episode is. We are so sick. We're badass.
No, but the reality of it is like, when I'm looking at a project, a client's paying us to have a completed project. So that's a full system. When you look at the final thing, you could say, oh, this is a really great, commercial. This is a really great music video. This is a great wedding. But how did that come to be? And the reality is I really care about, client. Are they being drugged through the mud to make this project? Or are they like along for the ride and enjoying the ride? Mm-hmm. So when we come to that, don't judge a book by its cover. A lot of people say, Oh, if it's a bad cover, but everything's beautiful on the inside. Well, let's flip it. If you have a beautiful project, but everything surrounding it is shit, then
Yes.
it's not a good thing.
Right,
So the
right.
whole system needs to work, and that's this functionality piece. I can get really particular in this. You can have the best camera on set, but if it creates a bunch of hurdles or it requires 4 people to do it and you only have one, that's not a functional tool.
Right, right. So I think, I want to interject here real quick. And like, I think where I identify this most is in industries as a whole, right? So, we do video, we do photo, design, marketing, all that sort of stuff, right? So I can look at those industries and people within those industries. And I feel like so often people really do pick style over substance. They are those people that are like, the camera is really flashy, but the experience you're going to get with me using it is going to suck, right? And it's way more about what is outwardly being shown than actually what is really happening. So again, the book cover analogy. We'll flip-flop it from what it normally is. There's a lot of things that have a rad-looking cover, right? It's this nice, flashy piece of whatever, whether it's a creative piece, whether it's a business, anything at all. Think of anything, right? Anybody listening? Picture something in your head right now. It's got a super flashy cover to it. But then when you open that book up and you start looking through the pages, you're realizing, like you said, it's crap. It sucks. There's nothing here. There's no real substance. There's no real purpose for these pages to exist. So then, realistically, why have the flashy cover in the first place? And I think a lot of people I almost don't know why they do that. I don't know if it's because it's more of like a short-term win versus like the long-term, that thing we talk about all the time. Like, I don't know. What do you think that is?
I have a point.
Okay.
I have a point here. I'm going to advocate for others for a second who choose style over substance. I don't think it's a conscious decision of style over substance. I think it's not taking the time to think about what is the substance, or in my case, functionality.
Yeah.
How does this tool function? Let's use a camera very quickly. Imagine we're using a camera that draws batteries super, super fast, but we only have 2 batteries. How is that going to affect production? That's going to stress someone out who has to keep the battery charged. Do we have enough people to do that? Do we have enough responsibilities that we can delegate? Let's talk lighting for a second. If we're using a lighting tool that requires 3 people to do it, but we only have 1 person on the lighting team, we're not including the client now, but we're screwing over our lighting guy who now has 3 people's responsibility as 1 person. So what I try to do as a leader is I try to consciously think about, what am I setting up for my team, for myself, and for my client? And if I am considering everyone in the substance of this, the formula, the process, I'm a better leader. I'm treating people better. However, a lot of people are pressured and they're like, well, everyone's looking at it from style. Like, we just want something pretty. Music video example. We love this video. We want something like this. Well, it's really easy to say, oh, okay, I can make something like this, but not thinking about the functionality of it. And I think, that's a harder thing to actually comprehend, to actually break down.
Yes.
And I pride myself in being able to do that. But I've also really done a lot of feedback searching from client, from crew, from hey, how do we actually build the next best thing a little bit better? And that's where I think you get into the substance side of things, is opening up that line of feedback from all parties.
Right, right. Well, and so that's, another point that I wanted to make, and I'm glad you brought that up, is, an actionable piece of advice, I suppose, if you're in that, kind of battle of what's the substance, is it more style than anything, blah, 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 is just looking at it of what's the purpose? Why are you doing what you're doing? And again, I want to clarify this because I think it's a lot of our examples on these 50-Minute Fridays come from what we do. Said it earlier, all the cool list of things that we do. This goes for anything. This goes for just even being a person. So maybe let's talk on that for a second. Like, it does not have to be well, I don't go on video production, so I don't need to worry about style over substance. I know, we both know, I think, people who choose the style over substance, right? They're worried about the cover of their book looking really flashy. kind of being a facade a little bit, maybe putting up that front, rather than figuring out who they really want to be, who they truly are, or are those outside pressures like you're talking about from even people in your life pressuring you to fit a certain mold, to fit a certain image. And that, in a way, dwindles down what your quote-unquote substance is as a person. I have been there.
Yeah.
And probably everybody has. I'm not going to sit and be like, oh my God, therapy hour. Like, no one's experienced this but me. But, I think that's why I'm such a huge advocate for, pushing aside the style of something and letting the substance, the purpose, the functionality, whatever you want to call it, letting that truly do the work and speak for, I guess I'll say it this way, letting those things create what the cover is.
Yeah.
Rather than having a bunch of random whatever is your pages and then plastering this fake cover on it and saying, that looks dope.
Well, let's marry the ideas. You can have both.
Right.
You can have style and you can have substance.
Mm-hmm.
So the big piece here is consistency. Your book cover shouldn't look like shit, and the inside of the book shouldn't be shit either. You should be kind of consistently, like
yes,
middle ground. Be where you're at. Own where you're at. Like
100%.
I'm not saying dress like a slob and get the cheapest clothes. I'm not saying have a shitty car. I'm saying live within balance of who you are.
Right.
Like instead of like trying to flex and be like, we're going to make the biggest production, but it's going to make us go in debt. Okay.
Yep.
Instead of purchasing the most expensive car, but it's going to make me go in debt. Mm-hmm. Instead of buying the most expensive house. But the point that I'm getting at is like, live within the means of who you are and to where it functions for you. Don't measure yourself against other people or, the standard of what you believe something needs to be. Think it through from a more holistic picture. And then you can marry those two together and create something that's consistent, that works, that is substance and style.
Exactly.
If you buy a cheaper house, maybe it's not your dream house, but you can afford to style it and give it some personality. Give it you.
And I'm super glad that you brought that point up because that's I think almost the all in all, like the culmination of this topic is that, the title of this, what I said at the top of it's style over substance or substance over style. The answer is that it doesn't have to be either. Mm-hmm. It can be both. Yeah. And I think that's the big issue that we're trying to kind of dig out here and uncover is that everybody does usually pick one. We can even talk on like the starving artist mentality for a second that people label, this like, oh, you got to grind it out and you got to hustle and you're a starving artist. And, people take that in a literal sense of like, yep, I'm going to actually starve. I'm going to have no money. I'm going to live well below my means, or I'm going to live in a shitty apartment because I'm a starving artist. I'm just in a band. I don't make any money. I'm not allowed to make any money. I'm just a creative. I'm just a this. I'm just a that. I'm a starving artist. That's not what that has to be. That's the book cover put on something called The Starving Artist, that you don't have to do that just because the style of that says that. Well, again, you can find the means in which you need to live.
I think in operating business, we did this. So, we've built projects that have been highly unprofitable for us, but we've been more so like we have a budget available to go really hard. And we go harder than what that project budget actually is. And I think a lot of people are guilty of this, of like, oh, maybe I got a raise at my job, so now I'm going to increase my lifestyle. Maybe we got the big project as a business, so we think we got to flex a little bit more here. Mm-hmm. That's not fair. That's not fair to other clients too. So, if you can do it more equally, like where we're at now is like, okay, if we don't have the biggest budget, then we don't have to say that the idea is not creative, but we need to scale the creative to match the budget. Mm-hmm. If we don't have the money for the big house, well, let's scale to the house we can afford and build a lifestyle within that house. This is kind of the universal thing here is like, you can still be stylistic within the realms of different things. You're just maybe not at that checkpoint in life to have the big flashy thing, but It's more so like, how do we make it as holistic, as realistic, as much as we want it to be within the confines that we're in.
Right. And it's that it comes down to figuring out who you are in that process and what you want out of that process or what you want to give into that process. So again, whether it's on a production or whether it's, getting a raise at a job, or you feel like you got to have the nice car, or you've got to spend that money that you're now making, like none of that actually has to happen. You know what I mean? Because again, it's what's the real purpose that you're doing it? What's the functionality that you have with that? Are you, you get an office space and you have this, a big studio space or an office space or something, and what purpose does it really serve other than the flashiness of saying that you have a space?
Yeah.
Or are you putting it to use?
Yeah.
Are there things, are there tools, are there setups, anything within that place that serve a purpose, that are functional to realistically grow you or anybody else that's a part of it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And again, that's like, I feel like I could throw out 100 examples, but whether it's real life, whether it's creative life, whether it's business, whether it's this, that, whatever. But I really do think that in general, it just comes down to finding out, what you really are in that process and what you need out of it, or what you can give to it, or how it really serves you. So it doesn't have to be the style. It doesn't have to be that, like, look past that, like, I need to look cool, or I need to come off as flashy, or we have to put up this front or this facade to be perceived in this certain way. Don't get me wrong. It's a hard thing to balance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, everybody uses social media. Everybody wants to post their highlight reels and all that sort of stuff. Everybody wants everyone else to see the coolest parts of what you do. But what's the real substance behind that? Because something can still be cool in the end, as long as everything else, again, like you said earlier, marry those two things together, mesh them together.
Maybe an analogy here off of what you said is like, maybe it's the house, maybe it's the studio you buy, the business that you own and run. Maybe it's awesome. It looks great. You got it. It's stylistic. But if the front door's broken, no one can get in, and you can't share it with anyone other than yourself. And that's not functional.
Right.
That's style.
Yes, 100%. So we're hitting our 15 minutes. And I think, honestly, about this, like, without digging into just super specific examples, we've said kind of all we can say about this, right? Mm-hmm. Is that when it comes to substance and style in anything, business or not, real life or not, creative or not, whatever it is, you don't necessarily have to pick one. You don't have to suffer just so the purpose and the substance is there, but you don't have to put up a front. You don't have to create this facade just to have a style that you feel like makes you perceived in some certain way. Mm-hmm. There is definitely a balance in which you can mesh those two things together. And I really think, coming down to it, what that comes from is just asking yourself that. If you feel like you're kind of caught up in that, if you feel like you might be doing something just for social media attention, or just for money, or just for, a certain friendship that there honestly isn't any value in, right? But you still want to be friends with that person for some reason, like, take a step back. And I think the biggest piece that I would say to somebody in this is maybe even just ask yourself, is this for style or is this for substance, right? Does this really add value to who I am, to what I want to do? Or does it actually grow me as a person or as a business in some way? Or is it just one of those flashy book covers that you lay down that looks like a cool thing that you're not really going to gain anything from?
Maybe this may be what you're hitting on, but like maybe authenticity, to yourself. Like, does this feel like an authentic relationship? Does this feel like an authentic decision, to who I am, to goals I have? Maybe that's a key piece of that too.
Yes.
The purpose piece kind of really brings me to that of like, just knowing who you are and then making a decision based off of that versus trying to get validation from other people, maybe in a more vain way than what you should.
Yes, absolutely. And it all comes down to that authentic word that we love saying oh so much. So I think that's a good way to sum it up. Is find what's authentic to you. And I guess maybe, I don't know, lying and putting up a front, maybe that is authentic to you. And I don't know if this 15-minute Friday necessarily can help that, and I don't really have any advice for that, I don't think. But the point is, we've all been there. I have 100% tried to impress people around me and like the things that they like and just fed into the style of something rather than figuring out the substance of it and what value I'm truly getting. I'm sure tons of people listening to this have. I'm sure, Josh, you have done that.
I'm on the flip side. I suffer through everything in the
Well,
world to be so
that's-
unstylistic
You're right.
that I'm like,
You're right.
I have the opposite problem. I put myself through a lot of pain and suffering for unnecessary reasons.
I bet you're doing that right now. You don't actually want to be a part of the What You Don't Hear podcast. You don't want to do these 15-minute Fridays.
Very true. I'm caught.
You're just doing it just for the style points.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're doing.
Yep.
No real substance. Well, that does it. I think we have to end it on that note because now I need to dig in and question you after pod to see if you really want to do any more
This
of these.
interrogation setting.
So, yes, this is now, I have set up this interrogation setting, not for the podcast, but to find out what kind of substance you really got in doing all these podcasts. Now that we're, 7,000 deep, I think, at this
7,001.
point? 7,001 now. 7,001 times that Josh Emerick has guested on the What You Don't Hear podcast, which means you probably know where you can find him on the internet. But just in case this is your first time listening to a 15-minute Friday or hearing or seeing Josh himself, Josh, let the people know where they can find you on the internet.
This is where consistency is really important and not changing your handle. You can find me at JM Emerick.
It's a good point. The thing is, I think people know by this point, there's a couple of these. We don't record them every Friday. They're recorded ahead of time. You can't change your handle after you record a podcast and you promote yourself on there, and then people are going to go look for you, and then they're not going to...
Functionality.
Functionality, purpose. What's the substance of your @ handle? That's the biggest point we'll take away from here. My @ handle is at Who's Ross Tyson around the internet, but most importantly, the podcast. Follow it, shout it out if you liked anything you heard. If you disagree with anything you heard, doesn't matter. Toss us a shout out on the internet. It means more than you know. Screenshot this, throw it on your IG story, and tag it at WYDH Pod. That was another 15-minute Friday. Hope you learned something, and thanks for listening.